In Badarikāśrama Dhruva Mahārāja's senses became completely purified because he bathed regularly in the crystal clear purified water. He fixed his sitting position and by yogic practice controlled the breathing process and the air of life. In this way his senses were completely withdrawn. Then he concentrated his mind on the arcā-vigraha form of the Lord, which is the exact replica of the Lord, and thus meditating upon him, he entered into complete trance. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. Here is a description of the Aṣṭāṅga-yoga system to which Dhruva Mahārāja was already accustomed. Aṣṭāṅga-yoga was never meant to be practiced in a fashionable city. Dhruva Mahārāja went to Badarikāśrama in a solitary place alone. He practiced yoga. He concentrated his mind on the arcā-vigraha, the worshipable deity of the Lord, which exactly represents the Supreme Lord, and thus thinking constantly of the deity. He became absorbed in trance. Worship of the arcā-vigraha is not idol worship. The arcā-vigraha is an incarnation of the Lord in a form appreciable by a devotee. Therefore, devotees engage in the temple in the service of the Lord as arcā-vigraha, a form made of sthūla, material objects such as stone, metal, wood, jewels, or paint. All of these are called sthūla, or physical representations. Since the devotees follow the regulative principles of worship, even though the Lord is there in his physical form, he is non-different from his original spiritual form. Thus, the devotee gets the benefit of achieving the ultimate goal of life, that is to say, becoming always absorbed in thought of the Lord. This incessant thought of the Lord, as prescribed in the Bhagavad-gītā, makes one the topmost yogi.
I was reading about, I forget where I read this, but Prabhupada was talking about all the yoga systems and how, how Bhakti Yoga is the only authorized system in this age. And all the other systems, there is no, every other yoga system besides Bhakti Yoga, you must be a brahmachari. There is no yoga system where anyone not a brahmachari is allowed to practice, even today. It's not authorized. And only Bhakti Yoga is not. There's only one yoga system that authorizes sex life, and that's Bhakti Yoga, because the Grihastha ashram can participate in Bhakti Yoga. And of course, that's under regulation too. So it's an interesting point he was making, that there's no, like here he mentions briefly that it's not a fashionable thing that's to be taught in cities. Cities, where people live. And, brahmacharya is like the first principle that must be followed in order to even begin practicing yoga.
Just even when you consider just spiritual life, Prabhupada's very, strong about that. If you do not have principles, I'm sort of preaching to those two today. I went out with two old friends from high school, Army friends, and it's very easy for things, to come up like that to preach on, and just regulative principles, because we talked a little bit about religion. But Prabhupada says real clear, a sinful man cannot make spiritual advancement. So, what we consider in terms of, we have our 4 regulations, some sinful activities. And, I mean, I feel, just the purification of, both of them were saying that, they needed their second cup of coffee. And I was saying how we're not even, we could take decaf, but we cannot have caffeine, and that is actually, just a simple little thing, but you need it, it becomes addictive. And, let alone to speak of some of the other, regulations. But you feel the difference if you've practiced. People who don't, and most people, of course, even when you think about in the different religions, we have these Orthodox Jews living near us, but they can drink wine, they can drink schnapps, they can take what they want, they can smoke. It's interesting to me. That, I mean, I love that. I really love that about Krishna consciousness. It shows seriousness in the practitioner.
I think that was one of the things, now that we're talking about it, I'm remembering way back when I first stumbled into a temple, was I saw a chance that I could get clean. I had so many bad habits. I did drugs, the whole thing, it was the hippie era.
Yeah.
1971. And I said, wow, I can get free of all of this. I can get clean here. And that was part of what attracted me,
That's the first time I've really, so many devotees, when they came back then, of course they were doing drugs and whatever else illicit sex, all the things. But I never really heard a devotee say that, which is, it's refreshing to hear, because they're unwanted activities, they're things that, again, make for addiction. Addiction is not a comfortable word.
Ultimately, they cause suffering. It causes suffering. Either something happens physically, because the body's not meant to deal with all that stuff, or it brings you into association with undesirable characters, and somebody either steals from you or kills you, or it's like,
no.
So it just brings suffering. Unmentionable activities. The four regulative principles of spiritual life. I was thinking about that. There's other regulative principles of spiritual life, which is different, like hearing and chanting and reading the Bhagavatam and engaging. Those are regulative principles of spiritual life. These are just regulative principles of human life, the four, just to get up to that human platform. I've heard that discussed before, and that makes sense too.
Yeah. I have a question. I mean, I know there were years that you weren't really involved with the temple and, chanting maybe and all. But in terms of the regulative principles, were you basically still following them?
Yeah, basically. I have to be honest. It was a struggle. It was a real struggle. Because I didn't have any association. And it was a struggle. And, but the victory is mine now.
Yeah, I'd say so.
We got our wounds and our darts and our steamroller and our helicopter blades, and and we survived, and we have victory now over. There's no attraction for any of the four, none.
Yeah.
I mean, I did them all. The gambling, the stock market. I'm gonna make a lot of money.
Heard that.
And I lost everything. I lost absolutely everything, and I went into debt for more than I had to begin with. So I got cured of that real good.
Yeah.
And then, there was still some temptation, not so much for drugs, because I'd already done that before I was a devotee. I was like, forget it. but, you know, and not meat eating, but a little difficulty with sex desire. There was a little difficulty there. You know, yeah. But, you know, just like, you know, what happened with the gambling, that also gets purified out. You know, for some of us, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, sometimes we have to, like, learn the hard way on some things, like why it's not good. Like we hear, oh, it's not good, but we don't really understand why. So then you go through some situations, you go, oh, that's why. Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's why. Yeah, I get it. So, like Prabhupada says in the purport, you know, even if somebody just does some minuscule devotional service and then actually falls down, I mean, I never actually, you know, trying to get away from Krishna consciousness, I just couldn't figure out how to practice it, you know, especially after Prabhupada left. How do I fit in, you know? So Prabhupada says, even if somebody just a little minuscule and then actually falls down, you know, what is it? There's no loss or diminution.
Yeah.
Even a little bit. That's how powerful this is. So, yeah. Boy, you really put me on the spot with that one. Bonnie.
What?
Bonnie, you put me on the spot with that one.
Oh, well,
The
you're,
professions of Meeta Devi Das.
you know, you're a senior devotee. You've been involved for so many years.
Yeah, a lot of battles.
And it's just, you know, it's just a question you want to ask. You wonder about. I came very late in life, you know, almost 40. So it's different because especially when you're so young, like the devotees came back then to Srila Prabhupada, they were so immature, and that period, as we all know, was like unlike any other time,
Whoa.
the 60s and the 70s.
Mm.
Yeah. You want to read?
Well, there's another part in here where he talks about the arcā-vigraha and
Yeah.
the different materials that the deity can become in, you know, metal, wood, jewels, paint. And there's a good interview with Ms. Nixon where she is bewildered by the deity. It's, you know, made of some material object that she doesn't understand. Prabhupada said, because you have material vision, you cannot see spirit. God comes in a form so that you can see him, because you have material vision. And she still couldn't get it. And he said, suppose you're at the bedside of your father and he's just died, and now you're crying, he's gone. And he asked her, Ms. Nixon, so what's gone? Why are you crying? He's laying there in the bed. What's gone? And she said, well, his spirit's gone. And Prabhupada said, have you seen that spirit? Or Prabhupada asked her, have you seen that spirit? And she said, no. And so Prabhupada said, so you cannot see spirit, and God is the supreme spirit. So he comes in these forms, maybe wood, metal, or brass, or painting, so that you can be trained up to see him.
Yeah, that's such a nice explanation.
Who was the Miss Nixon? That wasn't like vice president.
Is the fake interview
Yeah, it's one of
where
those.
a reporter, it's in the Science of Self-Realization, but there's also a video
Yeah, the video of her.
of it too. But there's a chapter of the Science of Self-Realization interview with Ms. Nixon. And then you'll see a video, you know, in one of the video collections. It's maybe 40 minutes long or so.
But especially, you know, of course, for somebody who's never experienced Krishna consciousness, and I mean, I remember the first time when I went to Radha Govinda Temple in New York and saw the deities, and you know, I had no spiritual vision, and even in India, I wasn't familiar with all of that. But, you know, again, it's like peeling off the layer. I mean, the chanting, let's face it. If you take to the chanting of Hare Krishna mantra, then you get the realization, you you're actually, Krishna is on your tongue. And so you get that purification, and then looking at the deities, you see them, it's like the spiritual eyes.
It's a science. It's designed like that. The Bhagavat path and the Pancharatra path, and they go together. It's designed like that. Yeah.
So nice.
Actually, Krishna's incarnated in sound. See?
Uh-huh.
Krishna's incarnated in the materials. So it's like you're caught, you know. Krishna's here, Krishna's there, Krishna.
Right. Yeah. Okay, you wanna read that next one?
Text 18. Due to his transcendental bliss, incessant tears flowed from his eyes. His heart melted, and there was shivering and standing of the hairs all over his body. Thus transformed, in a trance of devotional service, Dhruva Mahārāja completely forgot his bodily existence, and thus he immediately became liberated from material bondage. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Due to constant engagement in devotional service, hearing, chanting, remembering, worshiping the deity, etc., as prescribed in 9 varieties, there are different symptoms which appear in the body of a devotee. These 8 bodily transformations, which indicate that a devotee is already liberated within himself, are called Aṣṭāṅga-yoga. When a devotee completely forgets his bodily existence, he is to be understood as liberated. He is no longer encaged in the body. The example is given that when a coconut becomes completely dry, the coconut pulp within the coconut shell separates from the bondage of the shell and the outer covering. By moving the dry coconut, one can hear that the pulp within is no longer attached to the shell or to the covering. Similarly, when one is fully absorbed in devotional service, he is completely disconnected from the 2 material coverings, the subtle and gross bodies. Dhruva Mahārāja actually attained this stage of life by constantly discharging devotional service. He is already described as Mahabhagavat, for unless one becomes a Mahabhagavat or a first-class pure devotee, these symptoms are not visible. Lord Chaitanya exhibited all these symptoms. Thakur Haridas also exhibited them, and there are many pure devotees who manifested such bodily symptoms. They are not to be imitated, but when one is actually advanced, these symptoms are exhibited. At that time, it is to be understood that a devotee is materially free. Of course, from the beginning of devotional service, the path of liberation immediately opens. Just as the coconut taken from the tree immediately begins to dry, it simply takes some time for the shell and pulp to separate from one another. An important word in this verse is mukti linga. Mukti means liberated, and linga means the subtle body. When a man dies, he quits the gross body, but the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego carries him to a new body. While existing in the present body, the same subtle body carries him from one stage of life to another. For example, from childhood to boyhood, by mental development. The mental condition of a baby is different from that of a boy. The mental condition of a boy is different from that of a young man. And the mental condition of a young man is different from that of an old man. So at death, the process of changing bodies takes place due to the subtle body. The mind, intelligence, and ego carry the soul from one gross body to another. This is called transmigration of the soul. But there's another stage when one becomes liberated even from the subtle body. At that time, the living entity is competent and fully prepared to be transferred to the transcendental or spiritual world. The description of the bodily symptoms of Sri Dhruva Mahārāja makes it apparent that he became perfectly fit to be transferred to the spiritual world. One can experience the distinction between the subtle and gross bodies even daily. In a dream, one's gross body is lying on the bed, while the subtle body carries the soul, the living entity, to another atmosphere. But because the gross body has to be continued, the subtle body comes back and settles in the present gross body. Therefore, one has to become free from the subtle body also. This freedom is known as mukta linga.
Wow. That's such a great description. I got a little lost there at the end, though.
Well, you just keep your
With the
mind,
subtle body.
engaged in Krishna conscious activities. It happens automatically. Like Maharaj Ambarish did it the best way. It looks like Dhruva Maharaj is pretty much equally the same way. He's engaging every part of your body and mind in some activity, action that, is linked to somehow serving Krishna or the pure devotee. It says in Bhagavad-gītā, I think it's the 17th chapter, if you practice your faith, if your faith is in the mode of goodness, if your activities are in the mode of goodness, or your faith is in the mode of goodness, you purify the heart and attain pure love for Krishna. So it's a process that does, like Prabhupada says, the coconut pops from the shell, coconut pulp. The subtle body can be released by that engagement in Krishna service fully.
I thought the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego go with the soul.
Yeah, but you have to free yourself from that body also. And the process is Krishna consciousness. Well, the body's just a machine. The real body that's carrying on is the subtle body.
Right. Mind, intelligence, and false ego.
Yeah, that's the real body that is keeping us attached to the material world. So it's our thoughts and actions that it's like if you perform, like in the 16th chapter, if you're whimsical and you don't follow the religious principles, you fall down and take lower births and lower species of life. But if you follow activities according to scriptural regulations, you gradually attain spiritual perfection. And then this next chapter, Divisions of Faith, Prabhupada goes into the same thing deeper.
I was just looking at that paragraph where Prabhupada explains about existing in the present body. The subtle body carries one to different stages of life: childhood, boyhood, youth, old age. Mm-hmm. And the mental condition is different in each situation. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking what a blessing it is for someone to actually go through all the stages. Well, it's no fun in old age because the body's yucky and no, but that's not the real treasure of old age. The real treasure is to have experience traveling through all those different states of mind. Mm-hmm. And if you're practicing Krishna consciousness, wow. But even people that aren't practicing Krishna consciousness, somehow they're considered wise if they have gray hair, because they've just been through the stages.
It was interesting one time, because you try to practice Krishna consciousness, but your mind's always elsewhere. So many times, it's like unbelievable how you can be in Krishna consciousness so long, but your mind just goes off into like the usual nonsense, just like any karmi. But I remember I almost got into a horrible car. I went down the wrong way on a street and almost got in a head-on collision. And I wasn't even thinking of Krishna consciousness, but I went, Krishna! And I swerved, but I was surprised that I said Krishna. Because I wasn't thinking of Krishna,
Yeah.
At all, for like hours. That's like,
yeah.
But it was funny, like in a split second of danger, it happened automatically.
Yeah, like a reflex.
Yeah, it was a reflex.
Just as if you hit your knee, it'll pop off.
Yeah.
The reality of the situation, like, shocked you. Like, wow.
Yeah, but I thought that was super soul because he was pleased. Okay, you're trying. So you almost died. Here you can remember me. It was like he's like reminding me, look, it's working. The process is working. Although you might think like, I'm doing this, you wonder, you know.
I had a similar experience in a car wreck. I was a passenger in a van, and it was a head-on. And there was 4 of us in the van, 2 in the back, 1 driving, and me. We were out selling things, and it was late at night, and the person was tired coming the other way, and they crossed into the lane, and it was a head-on. They had a little car, we had a van, but it was at 60 miles an hour.
Oh my God.
Were you 60?
Were you physically hurt?
Here's the miracle. The driver was hurt pretty bad. You know, broken ribs and this, that, and the other thing, because it hit on her side. But there was a cider. We were drinking apple cider. It was like a gallon of cider. It was pretty full. It went through the windshield. And I was sitting in the passenger's side, no seatbelt, nothing, right? And I had somebody push their hands on my shoulder and pushed me under the dashboard onto the floor. And I just started going like you did, Krishna, Krishna. But I was the only one of the 4 of us that was doing that. Everybody else was going, ah, ah. But I know what you mean about it. It just came. Krishna, Krishna.
I don't think I was thinking about Krishna all day long. Anything to do with it, you know?
Yeah, you know, actually there are a lot of miracles in a devotee's life.
A lot of testimonies. I like that word, testimonies. Because you can really tell stories about how, you know, like when we say, oh, have we seen Krishna? No, but we've experienced him, you know, in these ways. When you have a testimony, it's like, well, how else? I mean, Pat Duffy, this person we know who got a clean bill of health with cancer, I mean, he really seemed like a goner. Everybody else I thought he was going to die too of this cancer, but he got a clean bill of health of recent. And he definitely, I mean, he doesn't know, you know, we call God Krishna, but he talks to God. You know, he does. It definitely gave him faith in a greater. That's who saved him, God. So
I guess another word for it would be some kind of intervention. Like when Vishnu intervened to stop the Brahmastra of Ashvatthama from killing Maharaj Parikshit while he was in the womb. It was an intervention.
Yeah.
He intervenes. He can intervene.
That's a great.
Yeah, or Prahlad Maharaj. He was a little angry when he did that intervention, but yeah. So it's not like there isn't anybody there. You know, I think sometimes we forget, I know I forget, and I think I have to do it on my own. But like what you were saying, Brahma, about how you weren't even particularly thinking of it, you were just doing practical stuff or whatever you were doing.
I mean, I chanted that day and
you
took a shot. I mean, at least, you know, that I was a devotee. But I wasn't, I did the and chanted my ones and I had bottom, but I don't think I did anything else that day, and I don't think I'm thinking about Krishna at all.
But at that specific moment, Krishna intervened.
Yeah.
Not only, you know, intervening by giving you the holy name, but intervening by keeping you from getting like seriously hurt.
Yeah. Or maybe he made me go in that wrong lane so I'd get a realization. Ted, yeah, this is working. It's working, don't worry.
Yeah.
It's something you don't forget.
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, wow, it's working. Because I wasn't thinking, this is back when we had the temple, but I was working and I was out that day and, it wasn't anything other than a routine work day, And you don't think about Krishna while you're working so much when you're busy.
Yeah, gotta keep
Think about other things, which seem very mundane, but he mentioned that in the purport, didn't he, about one of the Goswamis remained aloof. He did the needful material activities to run the government, and he stayed aloof spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like what we're practicing to do too. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the ones the Christians like. Give to Caesar what's Caesar's.
What's that?
Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Is it down to me? Who is it?
Mm-hmm.
Me?
And 19.
19, okay. Jai Shri Prabhupada. As soon as the symptoms of his liberation were manifest, he saw a very beautiful airplane coming down from the sky, as if the brilliant full moon were coming down, illuminating all the 10 directions.
You look like you're seeing them too.
Ah. If only. Prabhupada's purport. There are different levels of acquired knowledge. Direct knowledge, knowledge received from authorities, transcendental knowledge, knowledge beyond the senses, and finally, spiritual knowledge. When one surpasses the stage of acquiring knowledge by the descending process, he is immediately situated on the transcendental platform. Dhruva Mahārāja, being liberated from the material concept of life, was situated in transcendental knowledge and could perceive the presence of a transcendental airplane which was as brilliant as the full moonlight. This is not possible in the stages of direct or indirect perception of knowledge. Such knowledge is a special favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can, however, rise to this platform of knowledge by the gradual process of advancing in devotional service or Krishna consciousness. So knowledge, sometimes we just think it's like, the encyclopedia of knowledge. But here's different types of knowledge, and there's spiritual knowledge. There's transcendental knowledge, there's knowledge beyond the senses, direct knowledge, knowledge acquired from authorities. It's all kinds of knowledge. It reminds me of the practice, the 9 forms of devotional service: hearing, chanting, remembering. So usually remembering means, when I was in the 4th grade this happened and I remembered that, Or, remembering something like in the past. But I think the remembering is more like what happened to Brahma in the car accident. He remembered Krishna.
I have a question. I thought that transcendental knowledge would actually be the same as spiritual knowledge. Can you differentiate transcendental from spiritual? Give examples.
I guess spiritual knowledge is what is the spiritual world? The actual being present there.
What pops into my mind is transcendental knowledge could be impersonal also. Like transcending what? transcending the material modes of nature, transcending bodily identity. That could be impersonal realization. That could be Brahmajyoti. But like Brahma just said, spiritual knowledge means what's going on in the spiritual atmosphere. So maybe something like that.
Maybe. Well, I was hearing Srila Prabhupada when he was talking about when the soul leaves, it's so light, but it could go straight up. That's when he keeps telling us about going back to Godhead. Instead of that soul entering another living entity, it would just fly straight up to the spiritual world. So that was the first time I sort of, heard that in that way. But I always put those two words together, spiritual and transcendental. But that makes some sense.
That was interesting because
Differentiates.
in the new, the new printing, the red Bhagavatam, which people argue about, Prabhupada had ordered in that printing of that was a copy of, that he wanted a glossary in the Bhagavatam. Okay, the first printing doesn't have a glossary, so we can't look up the word transcendental because the first printing doesn't have that. But the 76th printing, the one that Prabhupada said to put it in, has the glossary. You'd be able to look up what's transcendental mean.
I have the, what one do I have here? I did have the first editions,
That's what we
and
have.
the devotees took it away from me. It's a long story. It- very painful. It's a very painful experience. That's all right. I'm not angry anymore.
I have edition Bhagavatam. I forget the name. Somehow I got somebody's Bhagavatam first edition. What was her name? From New Jersey. Turns out.
Oh.
I bought it from somebody, but it's her name's in it.
Wasn't she the one? Didn't she come to our temple?
Yeah, she gave us this mini Dwarkadish picture.
Yeah.
Okay, the one I have here, thank you, Krishna, that I have a Bhagavatam at all, is the second printing, 1978. So I don't think they had a chance to do much changing.
Well, what they
Thank
did,
goodness, yeah.
I think what they did in that one is that Prabhupada had the Bhagavatam, the first printing, had a lot of things done to it that Prabhupada didn't say to do. Like one of the things is if Prabhupada mentioned like a Bhagavad-gītā verse, they'll throw in the whole verse in purport. But it would throw off like what the point Prabhupada made, and Prabhupada ordered Jayadvaita to put it back to the original way. The ways had taken all kinds. So that was like the 1976. I think maybe it took a couple of years to do the whole thing. So that's what Jitarati, with that red Bhagavatam set, printed, because he ordered Jayadvaita to put it back in the original way. Jitarati says, from our research, it looks like that's what he did, is put it back the original way. But of course, he's not a very popular person now. So, and then Prabhupada wanted a glossary, and that was added, because the original didn't have a glossary.
There's a glossary in this one, but
Yeah.
it doesn't say what transcendental is.
Huh?
Yeah.
Maybe in the Bhagavad-gītā.
Google will know.
Yeah, they'll give you the AI version.
You want to read one more? It's
Yeah,
short.
that was an itty bitty. Okay, text 20.
Yeah.
Dhruva Mahārāja saw two very beautiful associates of Lord Vishnu in the plain. They had 4 hands and a blackish bodily luster. They were very youthful, and their eyes were just like reddish lotus flowers. They held clubs in their hands, and they were dressed in very attractive garments with helmets, and were decorated with necklaces, bracelets, in earrings. Purport. The inhabitants of Vishnu Loka are of the same bodily feature as Lord Vishnu. They also hold club, conch shell, lotus flower, and disc. In this verse, it is distinctly stated that they had 4 hands and were nicely dressed. The description of their bodily decorations corresponds exactly to that of Vishnu. So, the 2 uncommon personalities who descended from the airplane came directly from Vishnu Loka, or the planet where Lord Vishnu lives.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's the goal. Right.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
Yep.
Hare.
We'll see what happens next.
I really like this. I want to copy this. I like that little purport, the little purport that you just read from text 19, and then actually to that purport before that, with the bodies and the, subtle body and all that. Suggesting it. Yeah, good reading.
Right. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
That's right.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.